Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the EduHaven Donald Pencil series. This time we're going to do APUS because I'm currently taking this class and I have a test soon, and I kind of have to make a video on this stuff to help other people, also help myself a little bit. Um, this video is probably going to be long-winded. It's probably going to have not the best explanations because it's probably the fastest turnaround time I've ever had for a video. Without further ado, let's do this. I hope you succeed. This video is going to be pretty special because it's kind of just like I'm going to be rambling on about different topics. Basically, what you need to know for each one is the cause, the effect, and the importance, and I'll be highlighting them. However, you probably will need to rephrase these, and you'll probably need to um, make them more formal, and also you might have to maybe add a little bit more detail, which you could probably do by just looking it up a little bit. If you're confused about something, look it up. You can also ask questions in the comments. But without further ado, let's go. So, the Non-Intercourse Act. The cause of this was the Embargo Act, being the Embargo Act and um, British and French impressment of American ships. And so what happened was, in order to put pressure on the British and French to stop, we had the Non-Intercourse Act of 1808, by the way. Um, Now, what this led to was a whole lot of nothing. So basically, the British and French, or so the specifically what it did was reopen trade with all nations except the French and British, unless they decide to stop impressing and um like stop impressing and accept the neutrality of the U.S. Now, the thing about it is, so they had so French had the Milan and Berlin decrees made by Napoleon, of course, and these what these did was they put a blockade on Britain. The British responded by putting the orders of council, which put a blockade on French, and so that meant that when ships came in, they were being oppressed by the navies, pretty much. A big issue. The effect, whole lot of nothing. Let me see. Um, I guess it led to further tension. So that's I would say that's more importance, to be honest. So it led to more tension in that because they failed, and then they had to reopen trade after with Macon's bill. Um, they reopened the trade, and then the first to accept the neutrality, stop impressment, will get exclusive trading over the other. And what this led to was because they still were impressing, even though they tried so much, there was increased tension. This tension will lead to obviously the War of 1812, which is out. This is just nicely the next point. The War of 1812 was caused by because of impressment. There's actually several reasons. So impressment, British forcing the American sailors to join their navy. Um, Another thing was, so remember that the U.S. was the proclamation of neutrality was saying that they're a neutral country and that they would trade with others, but they're neutral. However, remember that the British were not respecting this, and the French were also not respecting this, and so therefore they wanted to go to war. However, the British were more than I don't think the French were actually doing that, but in essence, that's why that's caused the War of 1812. Next up, we have sorry, not next up, the effects of the War of 1812. So one of the biggest ones is after the invasion and burning of Washington, they burnt the White House down after the Americans invaded York in Ontario, in modern day Ontario, which is British territory. Another cause that kind of brings me to that point brings me to is that the British they so um the British were seen to helping or supporting the natives and to natives to rebel against the Americans. And so that was another point of contention. Eventually, they did do that. They initially weren't doing that. They eventually did do that after the Battle of Tippecanoe and William Henry Harrison. defeating Tecumseh, and Tecumseh going up to the reconvening with the natives and asking the British to help them out. So the effects after the burning of the Washington, of the not the person, the D.C. Washington D.C. Um, psychologically, the Americans want to create space from the thing that inflicts pain upon them. And so basically, this meant that they were just creating space. And what the space was eventually was the Monroe Doctrine. I don't have it here. The importance of the, let me see if there's another thing I have to mention. Yeah, so fun fact about the War of 1812, the effects, one of the effects. So I'm gonna go into two more effects, and we're going to talk about importance. Another effect, which by the way, effects can easily be turned into importance. Just to mention. Uh, but another effect is Andrew Jackson. After Andrew Jackson won the Battle of New Orleans, pretty much, whichever way you want to pronounce it, it led to him being a national hero, having national pride with him, and that led to his presidency, of course. Um, Another thing was, what was that? Okay. Then we have the Treaty of Ghent, the Ghent or Gent, that ends this war, the War of 1812. Eventually, basically nothing happens. All the it goes back to the pre-war territories. Um, but this means that the importance would be, um, so a fun fact about this is that the Battle of New Orleans happened during the Treaty of Ghent. And so it signified that time and space was an issue, especially because, let me see. Oh wait, actually, that's not true. Scratch that. So the waging of the war by Madison actually happened as the British were, I guess, they were like pretty much they were taking down the orders of council. So there was no need for the war. It could have maintained the peace, but it signified that time and space was a genuine issue with communication. Um, and also now there's new roads. So we have like the Cumberland Road. Actually, let me check. When was Cumberland Road built? Yeah. We have the Cumberland Road, which allows people to move west. And so after the war, um, we still have the Louisiana Purchase territory. So we can now Americans can now emigrate west, or move west. Okay. Now, the thing about another, I guess, effect of the um or importance of it could be both, remember, of the War of 1812 is the Hartford Convention. This was caused because the New Englanders opposed the war because they didn't want to stop impressment. They didn't like the embargo because, whoops, their ships can't trade with the British. And they also did not like when the British invaded Maine and the federal government didn't do anything. So they threatened to nullify some of them, the more like extreme ones, but it was really they wanted 2/3. Let me see if I'll write it here. 2/3 for the for war declaration in Congress. They wanted also the Virginia was like I think 4 out of 5 presidents up until now were all from Virginia, so they wanted one term for president, so to reduce that, and they also wanted to reduce the power of the southern states in Congress. So they wanted to take out the 3/5 compromise. So that way, the South do not get extra boost in congressional power, congressional representatives in the House of Representatives specifically. Um, let's see. Again, Hartford Convention. And this also marks the Hartford Convention. It marks the demise of the Federalist Party because it happens. It They pretty much sign it right as the Treaty of New Orleans is coming up. Sorry, the Treaty of Ghent is coming up. So basically, now it seems like they're not they're anti-patriotic. They just seem like they're not against it. They just make them unpopular, leading to their eventual demise. Um, Hartford Committee. I'm gonna cross these out as I go. Whoops, my marker is dying. That's fun. Oh, I probably should cap it. That's probably smart. But now we have the Missouri Compromise. The Missouri Compromise was the Missouri Compromise was caused by the Missouri having a bunch of settlers and wanting to. They applied for union. Now, what this led to, and so the Missouri Compromise. This was more of an effect, by the way. So the Missouri Compromise, they wanted, but they're a slave state, and so now the issue is, do we take them in? And there was always a balance of taking one slave state, one non-slave state into the country. And so now the balance would be off. It would be off balance towards the slave states. Then the Talmadge Amendment was proposed. It was passed in the House, not in the Senate. Turned it down, signifying, which by the way signified that the country was divided upon the peculiar institution of slavery. But basically, they let me think of this. So that was the cause. They want to maintain balance, and the Talmadge Amendment came out. Talmadge Amendment was proposed to uh to like um so it was rejected. Let me look it up. Talmadge. Okay, so they couldn't put any more slaves into Missouri. That was the main point. However, they eventually compromised. It was rejected. Then they found a compromise like a year later. With Maine was going to apply, so they made Maine into a non-slave state, Missouri into slave state, and then above the 3630 parallel, you cannot have any more slave states except Missouri, of course. And this kept the balance power, and it's important because it showed the division. All right, the last one is more like a series of ones. I only went to one. You probably have notes on all of them, or you can probably just look it up in your textbook or online. But it's McCulloch versus Maryland. It's all really just a bunch of judicial review cases within the Marshall Court. So the Marshall Court. So basically, the cause of this one is um, the Second National Bank is passed, and the country is like doesn't know what to do. I'm sorry, not doesn't know what to do. Maryland, specifically the Baltimore branch of the Baltimore State branch, um, sorry, Maryland, the state bank tried to tax the national bank, and the national bank refused. I think it was specifically the Baltimore branch. That doesn't really matter. Um, but because the Baltimore branch refused, um, the Baltimore branch refused, and so what happened was in the Supreme Court, Marshall decided that um, the effect was Marshall decided that uh, you can't do that. It goes against the supremacy clause. In effect, it diminishes state power, elevates the federal power, and by invoking the supremacy clause, and also it also solidified the national bank as constitutional because it was under the necessary and proper clause. It eventually becomes contested under like Jackson, who doesn't believe it's constitutional. But the importance is that the diminishing of state power, and there's other cases. Another one I'll mention is Dartmouth v. Uh, I don't know, Dartmouth v. Woodward. So pretty much Dartmouth College is a private college created by a charter, which was like a private contract between between the king from before and um, the college itself. And so And then the New Hampshire wanted to create into a public college. They couldn't do that because the federal government used so the Marshall Court invoked the contract clause. The government can't impede upon private contracts. In essence, it um, promotes economic growth by oh god by promoting individual or slash private property. So that's it. All right, let's continue. So I want to mention this. I forgot about it later before, but uh, all right, let's continue. So we have the Adams-Onis Treaty. The Adams-Onis Treaty also they also have the let's see if I remember this. The Anglo-American Convention, American Convention of 1818. I abbreviated a bit, but that's kind of a secondary factor that kind of happens after. It's not really Adams-Onis. So the cause of the Adams-Onis Treaty. Let's see. So the Adams-Onis Treaty, what it does is it between okay. So the cause. Let me go into cause first because it makes sense more. The First Seminole War. Andrew Jackson invades the Florida, Spanish Florida, into Seminole territory, calls it an act of self-defense. The Americans get upset. However, he's a war hero, so he can do whatever he wants. What ends up happening is, uh, the Americans say, "All right, we're gonna stop if you guys secede, if the Floridians, if the Spanish secede the land, they like cede, they like give it to them." The effect is the Amazonas. So the Amazonas Treaty. Excuse me. So the Adams-Onis Treaty creates it gives the Americans Florida, and it does not give them Texas. The Anglo-American Treaty, Convention of 1818 or Treaty of 18, will give the 49th parallel. It becomes the 49th parallel is the border between um, Canada and the U.S. It's between Oregon. Oregon is not what you think it is now. It's not a state. Oregon is like an entire territory along. It's Oregon, Washington, and like the north part of that. So it's like big Oregon. So that's the effect, right? Yeah, and the importance is I think it demonstrates that Southerners because the Seminoles they kind of gave refuge to um or sorry, not gave refuge. They allowed the runaway slaves from the South stay in their country, and therefore it signified that the Southerners um dang the Southerners wanted to uh maintain slavery. Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine, obviously, we talked about before. The the burning and invasion of Washington during the War of 1812 caused they want to create space, and therefore they said, you guys cannot. There's a parallel in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The European countries cannot interfere with um, the Latin countries, that the newly founded Latin countries, or the U.S. And the U.S. And so the importance of this is that the British they had mutual national interest with the British because um, both wanted to. So the British wanted to keep the Europeans out of the Americas. So therefore, they enforced it until the U.S. can do it themselves because they don't have a strong navy yet. Is that good? Yeah. I would say quasi isolationism. That's another effect slash um importance. All right, let's continue. So these are both these are from the first topic, the era of good feelings, under James or up until James Monroe. Now it's the Jacksonian era. So the Jacksonian era, remember 1824 he loses, 1828 he wins. using a bunch of, it's like democratic things, like democratic policies, like like widespread electioneering, like parades pretty much. So let's continue. Tariff abominations. The cause of tariff abominations is give me a sec. So they want to reduce foreign competition with manufacturers. So they instill a tariff on foreign goods, price goes up, their stuff looks cheaper in comparison, they have to buy it. However, we'll get to the however part actually. So the effect is obviously the South Carolina nullification, which is why I put them together. The South Carolina nullification is caused by the South Carolinians, or the Southerners, which are more farmers. They now have to um, they now have to uh, they now have to pay more because the cheaper British goods are now more expensive. So now they have to pay for the slightly less expensive or slightly more expensive North goods, and also um, other countries will put tariffs on their goods, and therefore they can't export stuff as much. But that's caused them to get upset. They try to nullify it. So nullify, they try to reduce, they try to like ignore it. However, it leads to the force bill. So Jackson gets total power of the Navy and Army to enforce the taxation, and it signifies he acts extra constitutionally. But my lips are chapped. But pretty much now, um, he now enforces it. Eventually, they reach the tariff of 1833, the compromise tariff, and so that all works out. And the importance is it signifies a division between the country, in terms of uh, like economy, and also in terms of economy, really. Make sure I have everything. Oh, also, it signified division in the executive branch because the author of the South Carolina nullification is John C. Calhoun, the vice president to Jackson. The vice president is actively going against the president. Let me see. I think that's good, but we'll check real quick. So yeah, and okay. Another thing is tariff abomination. So the tariff abominations. The first case of log rolling. So it's like compromising on. It's like a give and take system. It's like a give and take system to, excuse me, to pass bills. Last one of this video. Woo. The Trail of Tears. The Trail of Tears is caused because there's a couple things that kind of lead up to it, that like develop into it. Number one, Worcester v. Georgia. Number two, Cherokee Nation v. Georgia. Cherokee Nation v. Georgia, the nation pretty much, the Cherokee people sue the government, the state government, because they're like impeding upon their claims with like the federal government. The federal government goes, you can't do that. It's a federal treaty with the natives, so you can't just undo that. But the one I know more currently is Worcester v. Georgia. Worcester tries to go into the land without like a permit, gets taxed. He's like, oh, let's not do that. Let's just eliminate that, like the land. Georgia goes, all right, but then John Marshall goes, you can't do that because of it's like federal like treaty with the natives. It's kind of like they're foreigners, so it's like foreign policy they're really dealing with. However, in essence, Jackson is like, you can't tell me what to do, and condones the defiance against the Supreme Court. This leads to the Trail of Tears, the Indian Removal Act, and the Trail of Tears. This means that several tribes, including the Cherokee and the Seminole Nation from Florida, in the southern region, like Alabama, Missouri. no geography, Georgia, Louisiana, Florida, they all get moved to the west, thanks to the Louisiana Purchase. And so they all move down, they all move, and it signifies kind of like a melancholic aspect of the Jacksonian democracy. And let me make sure that's it. Yeah, the greed of the Jacksonian democracy as they were trying to enforce this using the military. And that seems it. And that is all on the topic of the era of good feeling, the era of good feelings, and the Jacksonian era. Um, Again, I apologize for the rushed nature of this video. It's kind of late. I kind of have to do stuff, but I hope you enjoyed this video. So please consider subscribing. Um, so thanks for watching, and I hope you succeed.